This is a free video lesson by totally.co.uk for IGCSE First Language English, looking at summary writing. If you like this video and you want to find more like this, then please do head on over to my website, totally.co.uk. You'll be able to download this PowerPoint and take a review quiz there and find lots and lots of more free video lessons that aren't on YouTube. Actually, this video lesson is part of a longer course that I made for IGCSE First Language English, which is available for free. You do need to sign up, but you don't need to put in a credit card or anything like that. And once you're on that course, you'll see all of my video lessons for both Paper 1 and Paper 2. You will find out more about this at the end, but basically, from September 2024, I am leaving my job and I'm going to be doing Totally full-time, essentially. So that will involve making more YouTube lessons, of course, but I'll be doing some one-to-one tutoring and some group classes and masterclass subscriptions and also paid courses that you can do as well. So please do consider going over there and registering your interest. If you would like one-to-one tutoring, the number of spaces are limited and I've already got a few students that want to do that. So do make sure that you get your name on the wait list so that you'll be first selected and you can pick your time and everything. But yeah, super excited. And if you've got more questions, then feel free to ask me in the comments. But it would be lovely to see some of you guys over there for my online tutoring and group classes. It will be online and I'll be working during the daytime in the UK. So that means I will be online in the evening time for countries like India and China and Malaysia, where I know that I've got a lot of viewers. So yeah. Head on over to totally.co.uk if you want to know more, and I'm going to put a little bit of information about it at the end of the video. So yeah, anyway, summary writing. I feel like that wasn't very concise, which is what I'm trying to teach you, but never mind. So starting off then with some background information about summary writing, where does that fit on your IGCSE course? So summary writing is also known as question 1F, and it's on question 1. As part of your paper 1, your reading paper. That's the paper that everyone has to do. So even if you're doing coursework, you will still all do paper 1. So for question 1, you will answer some short answer comprehension questions about text A, and then you will do a summary writing task about text B. I realised I didn't write A over there. And then these questions here are all about text C, where you will do some vocabulary questions, some language analysis questions, and the extended response. And all of that together will take you a lovely 2 hours. So I definitely also highly recommend that you're doing hand strengthening exercises, particularly those of you who are also studying history or psychology or other GCSE subjects where you have to write lots and lots of long essays. Practice writing by hand. I know that it's tempting with these practices because you're doing a YouTube video lesson to type it up, but remember, you're not going to be able to type it up in your real exam. So do be practicing your handwriting and building up your hand strength. That's a skill that students often overlook. They forget about just the endurance needed in these handwritten paper exams. First of all then, what is the purpose of a summary? What's the point? Why do we write summaries? Have a little think. The purpose of a summary. So you need to identify the most important parts of a text to give an accurate overview. So like you are looking down at the text and you are picking out those most important things so that I can look at your summary, and based on your summary, I know the main message that that first text was about. You should omit, not include less important details from a text. You should of course be concise. So trying to use as few words as possible to express as much as possible. Your summary should most definitely be shorter than the original text. Some of my students write 2-page summaries about a 1-page text. I'm like, so you didn't summarize. You should be writing using your own words, but making sure that you are not changing the meaning of the original text. That's really important. It's not a good summary if you have changed something, then you have just made your own text, basically. And essentially, you should be allowing your reader to have a good understanding of the source text without actually reading it themselves. Think about those of you guys who are also doing literature. You might read the Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, Lit Charts, whatever, rather than reading the actual text. Those are summaries of the text and not recommended. Be a good literature student. Actually read the book, guys. Reading marks then. So for summary writing, you get 2 sets of marks. So you get 10 marks for writing and 5 marks for reading. Firstly, let's focus on the reading marks and then I'll come on to the writing marks. So for question 1F, based on text B, you will write a focused summary. So you'll be focusing on a particular question. As I said, it's worth 15 marks, 10 marks for reading and 5 marks for writing. And you should spend about 20 minutes on this question, certainly no longer than that. Prepare to spend about 10 minutes to read and 10 minutes to write up your summary. And Cambridge recommend around 120 words in total. See that it says here it should be no more than 120 words, but do not count up your words. The Cambridge examiners never count up your words. It is a waste of your time. Instead, what I recommend is you should write no more than the first sheet of paper. So that is what, 2/3 of a page? Because obviously the question takes up a fair amount of that page as well. You might have very big handwriting. Maybe you'll write 2/3 of a page and 2 lines on the next page. But certainly once I start seeing students getting onto that second page, I'm thinking, you're not being very concise. You're probably including excess details here that you didn't need to include. Here is the summary question that we will be answering. Read text B, gladiators, in the insert and then answer question 1F. According to text B, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being a gladiator? You must use continuous writing, not note form, so you can't bullet point, it has to be in paragraphs. Use your own words as far as possible. Your summary should be no more than 120 words. Up to 10 marks are available for the content of your answer and up to 5 marks for the quality of your writing. So firstly, notice here, I told you before that you're writing a focus summary. When I say focus, I mean you're focusing on the aspect of the text that the question wants you to focus on. So here we are looking at the advantages and disadvantages of being a gladiator, right? So we're looking at the positives, the negatives of being a gladiator, but we are not looking for facts about being a gladiator necessarily. We're not looking for facts about the ancient Roman civilization. So do notice that you need to really focus in on that question so that you're not including anything that is irrelevant. So as I say here then, focus only on advantages and disadvantages. Ignore interesting facts. You also don't need to say how or why. Some of my students on their year 11 mock exam, what was the question? The text was all about a flight attendant's advice on being a good passenger, and the summary had to be like, summarize what you should do when you're taking a flight. But the students kept saying like, oh, you should tidy up after yourself so that the flight attendants can relax and rest or something like that. But they didn't need to say why. They just needed to say what you needed to do, not how you should do it or why you should do it. And because they kept giving reasons and explanations and justifications, their summaries were too long and it included too much excess. So be careful that often the how and the why and developing your ideas isn't necessary. You just need to say the answers and move on. For these types of questions, if you have an and, that helps you out massively. You can just write 2 short paragraphs, one about advantages and one about disadvantages. That helps you immediately for organisation. So my technique then that I recommend for question 1F. Firstly, you should read the question and then skim and scan your text. As you're reading your text, you should be highlighting for the answers. So you know that you're focusing on advantages and disadvantages of being a gladiator. We know that. We've looked at our question. In a second, we're going to read the text and you're just going to highlight as you read through. Remember that there are 10 content points available, so that means there will be a minimum of 10 points that you could find. Actually, there are usually at least 10. There are usually 14 or even 15 possible answers. So you should aim to have 10 possible answers minimum. Better to do 12 because you don't know for sure if the answer that you're putting down is actually on the mark scheme. So give yourself that little bit of wriggle room by having 12 possible answers. Remember that it's a focus summary, so only include the relevant information. If you include extra stuff you don't need, those facts or reasons, the how and why, you will get marked down for including extra things that you didn't need. After you have read your text and you've highlighted and you've found those 10 to 12 individual content points, then you need to quickly decide which points belong together and in what order, because you get marks for organisation. So for example, I might go through and find, okay, this is everything to do with violence. So next to all the points that are about violence, I might write a quick V, V, V. And these are all points to do with money or wealth. So I might do a quick M for money. So you need to think which points are similar, which points are you going to put together in the same paragraph or the same sentence. And Cambridge really don't like it if you do it chronologically in the same order as the text. Like, don't just say your points in the same order that the text says them. They want to see that you've put some thought into rearranging and reorganizing those ideas. And for summary writing, no introduction, no conclusion. Those sentences are wasted. It's a waste of your time. You're not getting any content points. It's irrelevant. It's not focused. It's not concise. So don't do it. Every single sentence should have a purpose. So I'm looking to see that all of your sentences contain at least 1 point from the mark scheme when I'm marking this. If you've got one sentence that doesn't have a point in, fine. But if you've got lots of sentences that don't have a point in, I'm thinking excess, waste. You're wasting your time. This is relevant. It's not focused. And I will mark you down if you do that. So the best ones do have at least one content point per sentence and they don't have any wasted sentences. Okay, so now we are going to read text B, Gladiators. Do have your highlighters out. Remember that you are focusing on the advantages and disadvantages of being a gladiator. Remember that you can download this PowerPoint and this worksheet. If you're joining me on YouTube, then that is linked down below. And if you are on my website on the course, then just scroll down. It's underneath the video. Everything that you need is right there. So we are looking at text B, which is gladiators. Okay, so text B, gladiators. Remember, you are highlighting advantages and disadvantages of being a gladiator as I read it out to you. Text B, gladiators. Gladiators, professional fighters who entertained Roman audiences with brutal battles, have a long and fascinating history. The origins of gladiatorial combat can be traced back to ancient Etruscan and Roman funeral rites, where slaves were forced to fight to the death to honour deceased aristocrats. Over time, gladiatorial combat became a popular form of entertainment, with thousands of spectators flocking to amphitheatres across the Roman Empire to watch the bloodshed. Side note and not relevant, but can you imagine travelling to go and watch two men fight to death? Like, oh, it sounds horrible. I guess, wasn't this one of the inspirations of the Hunger Games, the gladiators? I think it was. Gladiators were trained professionals who fought in a variety of styles. Some fought with swords, shields, and armour, while others fought with nets, tridents, and daggers. There were also specialised types of gladiators, such as the retirus, who wore a fisherman's net and trident and tried to entangle and stab their opponents, and the secutor, who wore a helmet with a narrow eye slit and chased their opponents relentlessly. Being a gladiator was a dangerous and gruelling profession. Gladiators were usually slaves or prisoners of war who were forced to fight. However, some free men chose to become gladiators for the fame and fortune that came with winning battles. Training was intense, with gladiators undergoing rigorous physical and combat training to prepare for their battles. They were also subjected to strict diets and often lived in barracks or prisons. Gladiatorial combat was not always to the death, contrary to popular belief. In fact, many gladiators were highly skilled fighters who were valued for their entertainment value. Killing a valuable gladiator was not practical, and many battles were fought to submission or until a gladiator was seriously wounded. Oh, is that all? That's very nice. Not until you're dead, just until you're like almost dead. Very, very kind of the Roman emperors. Because, you know, the men were worth a lot of money. Nothing to do with the sanctity of life, just, oh, they're worth quite a lot of money. Just stab them, but don't kill them. Thank you. The popularity of gladiatorial combat reached its peak during the Roman Empire, with the Colosseum in Rome being the most famous amphitheatre where gladiators fought. I've been there. It's very, very cool. The Colosseum could hold up to 80,000 spectators, and gladiatorial games were often sponsored by wealthy citizens to gain political favour. The games were used to distract the masses from social and political problems, with emperors using them as a tool to maintain control over the populace. Some people say that reality TV shows or like singing competitions like X Factor are kind of like the gladiator fights because it's just distracting people from political problems because everyone's too busy watching these mind-numbing TV shows or arguing online about characters in reality TV shows rather than focusing on what their political leaders are doing. Again, that's another side note. The gladiatorial games eventually fell out of favour as the Roman Empire declined, with the last recorded gladiatorial games taking place in the 6th century. However, the legacy of the gladiators lives on in modern culture, with their image appearing in films, television shows, and video games. All right, so take a second if you haven't already, highlight through. Can you find at least, and I'll give you a hint, there are 6 advantages and 6 disadvantages that are on the mark scheme. So can you find those, highlight those, and we'll go over, see how many of those you got. So how many of those 10 to 12 possible answers did you find? Advantages and disadvantages of being a gladiator. Remember that you had to avoid the irrelevant information, facts, how, why, information that was about fights rather than about the gladiators themselves, and avoid repeating the same idea. Begin to think, if you haven't already, how will you group the points? Which points are similar? Which points would flow well together in the same sentence? If you found those content points and you're ready to have a look at the mark scheme, let's go. And if you've not, quickly pause now because I'm about to tell you the answers. Here is the mark scheme. Advantages of being a gladiator, first of all. Fame, or thousands of spectators would watch you, same point. Fortune as well. Trained professionals or skilled at fighting. Some opted, some chose to become a gladiator, so not everyone was forced. Not all fights were to the death, or killing a gladiator wasn't practical. And the fact that the legacy, the legend of the gladiators still lives on today, or that they've had a long-lasting cultural impact. Yeah, sure, they died in battle, but they got some very nice films made about them in the 1990s. Disadvantages of being a gladiator. That is brutal, there's bloodshed, it's dangerous, it's grueling. So any of these generically bad adjectives about it being dangerous or bloody, they're worth 1 point, but 1 point only. So that's what I'm saying. Make sure that you're not repeating any words or ideas. That many were forced to fight, there was no choice, that they were slaves or prisoners of war. Obviously, if you are a slave or a prisoner, you don't have a choice. So that's why they're on the same bullet point. That there is intense training, and that they have strict diets or their food is controlled. That they lived in prisons or barracks, and that they are just a tool, used as a tool. So these are our content points. How many of those did you get? So Cambridge are looking to get 10 out of 10 marks, that you have 10 points and no excess. So if you were highlighting things that weren't on this mark scheme, even if you got 10 points, you wouldn't have got 10 marks overall, because you also included extra irrelevant information, what we call excess. So check not just that you've got the answers, but also that you weren't highlighting extra stuff. And if you're wondering where those answers were in the text, you can see here that I've highlighted it. So you can see that the yellow is the disadvantages and the green are the advantages. And hopefully this can also help you to see how many distractors there were. So distractors are anything that is irrelevant extra information designed to distract you as the examinee. So if you're including anything about swords and shields and armor, for example, that's completely irrelevant. That's not an advantage or disadvantage, that's just a fact, right? So most of this second paragraph actually is entirely irrelevant, and most of this second to last paragraph is mostly irrelevant. So for example, if you're talking about the Roman Empire or the Colosseum, that's nothing really to do with the advantages of being a gladiator as a job, right? The fact that it's being sponsored by wealthy citizens also isn't necessarily relevant. So you need to be really careful that you are not accidentally including all of this extra irrelevant information, because you will lose marks for doing that. Okay, so we have discussed the reading marks now, and you probably have an idea of how many content points you got and how many extra distractors you included. But how do you actually write it up? Now, you only get 5 marks for writing here, so if I had to give you some advice, it would be to mainly focus on finding the content points. And if you write a pretty good summary, you've tried to organise it, you've tried to write in your own words, you'll probably do fine. You'll probably come out with 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5. So just focus mainly on the reading points would be my advice for this question generally. Now, what you're being marked for here really is your skill of paraphrasing. Paraphrasing means how to write using your own words. I have got an extra exclusive paraphrasing video lesson on totally.co.uk. The link is on the description. It's completely free, and it's not on YouTube. It will never be on YouTube. So if you want to watch my paraphrasing lesson, then yeah, go onto my website. The link is in the description. I think I said that already. Anyway, so paraphrasing, the skill of writing using your own words. So you must try to write using your own words wherever possible. However, if you don't know a synonym, there's a word, you can't think of another word for it, I would rather that you just use that word rather than losing the content point. So, for example, say the word is mammoth, right? You know, like the ancient animal that's extinct. Say the word is mammoth and you don't know a synonym for it and you call it a big old mammal. You've changed the meaning, you've confused the examiner, so you've not paraphrased well, you're not going to do well for paraphrasing, and you've also lost the content point because you've changed the meaning too much. So there comes a certain point where you have to judge, do you know another word for that word? Are you certain you know what it means? And if you're not certain, just copy the word. There are 10 marks for reading, 5 marks for writing. This is what I mean. The reading marks have to take priority over the writing marks. Sometimes it's not possible to get a good synonym for very, very precise nouns. Like mammoth, there are no synonyms for mammoth that you could use that wouldn't change the meaning. Or cave painting, what are you going to call it? Artwork within a stony structure. Like, if the nouns are very precise, very specific, you can't really change them without changing the meaning. So generally, those very precise nouns, just copy them. So paraphrasing then is using synonyms, so using words that have got the same meaning. You can also switch around the sentence structure. So say you don't know for certain a synonym. Say perhaps a sentence says, gladiators use spears and tools to kill their opponents. You can change it to, opponents were killed by gladiators with spears and tools, right? And you've just kind of swapped the order around, and that can be a way to gain some marks. Also, change the order of ideas from the original text. So don't copy chronologically in the same order as the source text. You should be grouping your ideas in your own way. Paragraph about advantages and disadvantages should help you to do that. Remember that the main aim of a summary is to be concise, be short, and keep the meaning the same. So these are things that you should be thinking about when making choices about how you are rewriting some of those points in the summary. Let's have a look at how you can do this. So I've got a paragraph here from the source text, and you can see that I've already highlighted it for the content points. So here the advantages are in blue and the disadvantages are in yellow. Firstly, I want you to think about which words are too precise that you just can't change without altering the meaning of the text. Which words in this paragraph would you say, I'm just going to copy them? If I try to use a synonym, I'm just going to change the meaning, I'm just going to lose the content point. Which words can you not change? Have a think. So I would suggest here some of our very precise nouns, like gladiator. What synonym can you possibly use? Warrior, but that kind of changes the meaning a little bit. Soldier, definitely changed the meaning. So gladiator, keep it the same. Similarly, slaves and prisoners of war. I guess you could change it to war prisoners, perhaps, but I wouldn't be changing it to a synonym. And also barracks and prisons. These nouns are very precise too. For prison, perhaps you could say jail, that would be fine. Barracks, dormitories, but once again, only if you're sure. If you were in the exam and you weren't sure of a synonym, I would find it completely fine if you've got a few words that are the same, especially these precise nouns. Wouldn't be a big deal to me. You could still get 5 out of 5 as long as everything else was organised well and paraphrased well, and you've changed around the sentence structures and you're being very, very focused and concise. It shouldn't be too much of a big deal. Let me show you some example paraphrases then. So firstly, I am going to paraphrase this second sentence that I've bolded. So in the original text it says, however, some free men chose to become gladiators for the fame and fortune that came with winning battles. So here we've got even 3 content points in one sentence. So the way that I chose to paraphrase it, to become wealthy, to become famous and wealthy, some gladiators willingly chose the profession. So I've used a synonym. I've said wealthy rather than fortune. And here also it says fame and fortune, whereas I've gone fortune and fame, right? And again, rather than saying fame, I've said famous. I've also changed the order of the sentence around. So they've given the reason in the second half of the sentence for their fame and fortune, right? But I've begun with the reason to become famous and wealthy. Some gladiators willingly chose the profession. So chose to become gladiators. I've still said chose, but I'm putting here willingly. Okay, so that's one of my own words too. And rather than repeating gladiators, I'm saying profession here. So notice here it's got like fact, fact, because, reason, and reason. Whereas I've gone because of, reason, and reason, fact, right? So I've changed the order around as well as using some synonyms. However, I have still not really organised it any differently from Cambridge. Like I've not got multiple points from across the text and combined them. I'm still basically copying their same sentence. But this would be fine, but let me show you a better example of how you might want to paraphrase. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring together some points from across different sentences. So remember, like I said before, you want to reorganize it and not just chronologically copy the same order that Cambridge have given you. So here I'm going to take points from all of the bolded sentences. That it was dangerous and grueling, training was intense, and they were subjected to strict diets. So these are the points that I'm going to pick out. So I've said arduous and perilous. Being a gladiator was physically harsh, with punishing training regimes and strict diets being enforced. So I've used some synonyms first of all. So arduous for grueling and dangerous for perilous. So we've got some synonyms. But then I've also combined from down here. So that it was physically harsh with punishing training regimes. So punishing training regimes. So punishing as a synonym for intense. And then rather than saying training was harsh, I'm talking about training regimes were harsh. I've still kept in strict diets because that's really quite precise. And I could think of other ways to say that, but I don't think it would be more concise. I think I would be making the phrase longer to do it. And rather than saying they were subjected to it, which suggests no choice, I've said being enforced. So this is a slightly better paraphrase because I've got multiple ideas from across the text. I'm using synonyms and I'm switching around some of the orders, but I have still got a few of the same words or phrases, and that would be fine as long as it is just a few of the same words or phrases. Finally then, here is another example. So I'm going to be paraphrasing from the bold, so that they were usually slaves or prisoners of war and that they often lived in barracks or prisons. So here is my paraphrase. Many slaves and prisoners of war were compelled to fight and then were accommodated in prisons and barracks. So I've still got slaves and I've still got prisoners of war because those are very precise nouns. Perhaps I could have said war prisoners. And I've got a synonym. Rather than saying forced to fight, I am saying that they were compelled to fight. And I'm joining it up with a point that's later on. So I'm showing Cambridge, I'm thinking about which points are similar. Because prisoners, well, that point links and flows very smoothly into that they lived in prisons and barracks, right? Those 2 points seem to belong together. So rather than saying they often lived, I'm saying that they were accommodated. So I'm using a synonym. And here is a very simple one that you can do. So say that you don't know a synonym for prison or barrack. Remember, we could have said perhaps jail and dormitory. Here it says barracks and prisons. 1, 2, and up here, wow, very clever, I said prisons and barracks. So like that's a very simple thing you can do. Cambridge is still gonna be like, yeah, they've copied the word, but you've tried to switch it around. You've not just directly copied, you have actually thought a little bit about your ordering. So that's a quick and easy one that you can do if you're really not sure. Just simply change some of the orders of things around. Now let me show you guys an exemplar that would get full marks for this question. Being a gladiator was a bloody life for many slaves and prisoners of war who were forced into the job. With strenuous training and a mandated strict diet, the lifestyle of gladiators was rigid and brutal. Furthermore, many gladiators had to live in prisons and barracks. These gladiators were used as tools by emperors as a distraction for the population. However, as skillfully trained professionals, some gladiators chose this path for wealth and fame. Though being a gladiator could be dangerous, not all fights were fatal, since gladiators could be prized for their ability to entertain vast crowds. Because of this, ancient gladiators are still famous in the modern day with a huge cultural impact on the modern media. and that has got a total, in case you were wondering, of 118 words. Firstly, can you spot where the content points were in this example? Okay, and this is where they were. So what Cambridge will do when they're marking your work is they will literally number from the mark scheme. See here that the marks like 1, 4, 8, whatever. They will write in the margins which content points you are actually achieving and any content points that you are repeating. So this is what it will look like. This is number 7, number 8. This is number 8 as well. It's repeated though. It's the same idea and the same bullet point. 9, 10. 7, but it's repeated, brutal, bloody, same point. Prisons and barracks is 11. Tools, 12. Skillfully trained, 3. Chose this path, 4. Wealth, 2. Fame, 1. Dangerous, 7, but it's repeated once again. Not all fights were fatal, 5. Vast crowds, talking about the crowds once again, so that's number 1, but it's repeated because fame and vast crowds are the same thing. And still famous is 6. Huge cultural impact, that's the same as famous, so that's also 6, and the repetition. So this is how Cambridge will mark it. Now this would still score 10 out of 10 even though it has got some repeated phrases because it has got 12 content points. Remember, you need to have at least 10, but this one's got 12. And there are no sentences in this example that don't have a content point in. So there are no pointless sentences. There's not a lot of excess material. Yes, it's repeating a couple of the same content points, but it's repeating a different idea in the same bullet point rather than just saying dangerous again and again and again. So it would still get 10 out of 10 for content. Here are some of the paraphrases that the exemplar used. Not all of them I put in this table because space, but also because some of them have been so moved around from the original order that it's kind of hard to have the original text and the paraphrase because there's multiple points in the same sentence. So do notice if you go back and have a look how many sentences have got multiple points in that were originally spread across the whole article. So it's really reorganized the whole text so that it flows nicely in this summary, which is kind of hard to show on a summary table, but that is why it would also, by the way, get 5 out of 5 for writing. Not just because it's paraphrased really well, but also because it's organized its ideas really well. So some paraphrases. This idea about free men, well, that shows that they chose the path for themselves, right? So chose to become gladiators, but here we're using this metaphor, chose the path. And rather than saying fortune, I am saying wealth as a synonym. Subjected to strict diets, subjected, same meaning as mandated. This idea that the legacy lives on, so if your legacy is still alive, well, that implies that you are still famous. And it still lives on in modern culture, so it's had a huge cultural impact, right? So I've reused those kinds of synonyms there. And this idea here, I've been really concise. Not all battles ended with death. Many battles were fought to submission. So basically, not all fights were fatal. So I've really used a very good and precise synonym there because I've managed to turn a really long sentence into a really short sentence with just one word. Essentially, this is how you are marked for summary writing. So for the 10 marks for content, how many points from the mark scheme did you identify? So if you got 10 content points, you could be getting 10 out of 10 if you also stayed focused on the question and you didn't have excess irrelevant information. Now, if you get, say, for example, you get 10 content points, but you've also got lots of excess in there, then the examiner will probably mark you down at least 1 mark, more like 2 marks, depending on how bad the excess is. So you might end up 8 out of 10 because you've got 10 content points, but you've also got extra irrelevant information. Then for writing, you get 5 marks. So the examiner is looking, did you write using your own words or did you just copy? How well did you paraphrase and use synonyms? And how well did you reorganize the ideas so that your summary flowed nicely and that all of the points that were similar were kind of in the same sentence or one sentence after the other? That's what creates the flow, right? This point is similar to this point to this point, so it flows as you read through it. Finally, looking at my key takeaways for question 1F, your summary writing question. Remember, you are writing a focused summary on the specific aspect of the text, so you are not just summarising the whole text more generally. You should aim to get at least 10, more like 12 individual content points for your summary to maximise your reading marks. And don't repeat points or you will lose marks because you will no longer be being focused or concise. You should group together similar ideas. You could do that with a conjunction like and, or you can use a semicolon. Don't include extra irrelevant information that doesn't actually answer the question. Those hows, whys, reasons, they're often the extra irrelevant information. Don't copy or quote. You should always be using your own words wherever possible. So it must be 99% in your own words. But be careful not to change the meaning. And if you're not 100% sure that your synonym is a good synonym, you're worried it might change the meaning, in that case, just copy. I would rather that you gained more marks for reading and lost 1 mark for writing. You are aiming to be as short and as concise as possible. And some general advice would be that often those very precise nouns are the ones where it's harder to use synonyms, where you risk changing the meaning. So do be careful on precise nouns. If you like this video lesson, then do head on over to my website talkly.co.uk, where you can find more lessons like this, including that exclusive paraphrasing lesson. Remember that I've got stuff on there for IGCSE First Language English and IGCSE English Literature and IB English A as well. I will be starting that one-to-one tutoring and group classes and master classes and also courses that you can buy over there as well. So I really hope to see you over there, and do recommend it to a friend, right? Give it to your classmates, you know, help a bro out. And by the bro, I mean your classmates, not me, but you'll also be helping me. Do like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.